Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to part two of our series on writing grants. So during last week's session, we discussed components of an effective needs assessment and how to gather communities, school, student, and family inputs, and how all that data should inform your grant proposal. Today, we'll go over the legislation and guidance behind the 21st CCLC project and explore how to design a 21st CCLC program that links activities to needs that we identified last week while meeting the 21st CCLC requirements. But first, let's introduce our speakers here. So, I am Chaz Sumners. I was here last week. For those of you that were joining us last week, I've spent 11 years teaching special education in English, and I had the opportunity to work through basically every different facet of out of school time programs. I started as just like frontline staff and worked my way up through site coordinator and program director. So I'm familiar with a lot of the challenges that are present in different stages and phases of the OSC program, as well as the grant process. And with me today is Shanika Peck.
Good afternoon or good day, everyone. My name is Shanika Peck. I'm one of the senior TA liaisons who are supporting the different states around the nation. So I've spent a great deal of time reviewing RFPs and discussing with subgrantees about their grant and how to best implement those grants. So I'm really excited that we are in a place where we can talk more about our plans for grant writing. Now, I wasn't here last session, Chaz, but I would love to hear from everyone in the chat box. Share what stood out the most to you from the first session. And if you'd like to, you can also share what you are looking forward to for this session. So again, feel free to jump in the chat box. Thank you for letting us know where you are coming in from. We have a lot of different representation around the nation, but let us know what was your your takeaway from the first session and what you are looking forward to for this session. I'm going to hand it back over to you, Chaz.
All right, I'm seeing some responses come in from the chat. Looks like a lot of importance of needs assessments and how to write compelling needs assessments and how to use data for a needs assessment and what those types of data are. That's awesome. I'm glad we had some really great takeaways from that first session, and I'm sure we'll have some equally valuable information, here in this session. So let's go ahead and get started. So just a little bit about who we are and what we do. So the National Technical Assistance Team, we're here to build capacity in your 21st CCLC programs, and we do that a bunch of different ways. We do that with professional learning opportunities, virtual learning experiences like this, and coaching, as well as a number of other things. Anything we can do to help you deliver your best program to your kiddos and your families. So let's take a look at some of the 21st CCLC NTAC priorities. So you see here that some of our priorities focus on addressing the impacts of COVID-19, academic areas of focus, but today, the particular areas that we're looking at are statutory and programmatic requirements, right? Because we're talking about building that grant and fiscal requirement compliance. Just, different aspects of the grant writing process and the information surrounding those, just so that you can build a grant proposal that really knocks it out of the park and shows people the incredible program that you're looking to put together. So let's jump in. All right. So today, our objectives are to review legislation and guidance that inform the 21st CCLC project, right? So a lot of that guidance, it can be in a couple different places. So having it all together and reviewing it is really helpful when you're like thinking about things to keep in mind when you're drafting a grant proposal. We also want to explore the goals of the 21st CCLC programs and how they're measured, right? Because, we want to make sure that our grant application is tailored to what the goals of 21st C programs are. And we want to make sure that we're measuring them in order to make sure that we have data that we can actually prove could be successful. and that we can actually demonstrate a need for our program. And third, we're going to examine how to design a project that links those needs that we've identified to intentionally designed activities that we have created in our program. So let's dive in. So, federal funding through the 21st CCLC programs really makes a difference in creating access to after school and summer programs for many throughout the country. However, with federal funding comes a lot of reporting requirements, right? And while this certainly can be the drier part of 21st CCLC, it's probably the most important. We won't spend a whole lot of time talking about this today, but we just wanted to highlight for you some of the importance of familiarizing yourself with the legislation. So, when you're considering applying for funding, it's incredibly important to thoroughly review not just your RFP or RFA, but also any legal documents and guidelines that the 21st CCLC program will be held to. Understanding this legislation will help you be prepared for the requirements for your funding. So, the 21st CCLC programs are formed by federal legislation that defines how programs must operate and what they should entail. These are also there are also federal regulations that guide compliance with these laws. The US Department of Education has provided non-regulatory guidance to improve comprehension of the legislation and to advise on best practices. But understanding these laws and regulations and the guidance that accompanies them is an essential part of writing your 21st CCLC grant proposal and to maintaining your grant funding. So, the 21st CCLC programs comply with legislation, regulations, and guidance. And the legislation that establishes the funding and the goals for the 21st CCLC program is called ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act. Regulations are policies and procedures for federal grant recipients, which include both internal controls as well as some grant management standards. Guidance helps provide directors and other staff a means to interpret all of this legislation and these regulations. Non regulatory guidance is not legally binding, but they're normally best practices for your program. So, because your grant proposal becomes a legal agreement once you're awarded funding, it's important that you understand the guidelines that dictate that implementation. So, today we're going to take some time to review these important laws and the regulations. So, the Nita M. Lowey 21st Century Community Learning Centers Program, Title IV, Part B of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, um, has some non-regulatory guidance that got updated in 2024, and we're going to go ahead and drop that in the chat for you right now. Boom. So let's take a minute and get real, right? Where are you guys in reviewing the legislation? Tell us in the chat if you haven't done it yet, if you've reviewed it a little bit, or if you could just recite it back to us from memory. Says the page is not found. It's very strange. All right. Well, anyway, so it looks like we're getting some feedback. Looks like some people have looked at it a little bit. Some people haven't looked at it. I get it. It can be sort of daunting, right, when we look at all of that. But if we look at it piece by piece, then it becomes a lot more manageable, right? We're also going to provide a handout to links with the legislation and some other helpful documents in the chat if you couldn't access that. So, what are 21st CCLC programs? The U.S. Department of Education explains that the Nita M. Lowey 21st CCLC is a federally funded program that supports academic enrichment opportunities during non school hours for children, but like all children, but particularly students who attend high poverty and low performing schools. The program helps students meet state and local standards in core academic subjects such as reading and math. It also offers students a broad array of enrichment activities that can complement their regular academic programs, and it offers literacy and other educational services to families that have participating children. There are a lot of different benefits in addition to just the academic benefits that the 21st CCLC programs provide. So, who do they serve? Well, 21st CCLC programs serve students. So, students living in low income homes, particularly those that are maybe a little academically behind or in low performing schools. Um, it serves families, right? 21st CCLC sites provide programs and opportunities for not just our students, but the families of our students. But as 21st CCLC providers, we also serve schools, right? The purpose of the 21st CCLC ultimately is to support and supplement the learning that happens during that school day. So we're that great supportive part. Um, and lastly, something that can sometimes get overlooked is just how much 21st CCLC programs serve their communities. So 21st CCLC sites form partnerships with all types of other local organizations to expand services and opportunities for their students and families. And that serves the community by building this interconnected, this web of different resources that could be available to families. So, last week, if you recall, we discussed the process for a needs assessment and the types of data that you should access to complete it. So let us know in the chat box what the most urgent needs in your community are and how you know those are the most urgent needs in your community. I know, I mean, just as an example, in the district where I worked for 21st CCLC programs, and we had a fairly high rate of community violence and sort of violent crime that was attached to students, as well as like higher rates of vandalism. So to me, it told me that we needed a place for our students to be able to just like grow and be kids where there was some support, but we knew they weren't going to get in trouble, but they could still grow and explore. Oh, okay. Increased school attendance is a huge problem. And a needs assessment is needed to figure out what's keeping kids from coming to school. Absolutely, right? We need to figure out, we need to get to the root cause so that we can figure out how to address that cause. More supports for low income families and our unhomed families, absolutely, right? Again, we're here to serve our families and communities in a number of different ways. Place for kids to be safe and that they can continue to learn and be happy. Yep. Yeah, I know this because parents have told us, right? That word of mouth data collection is really important, especially when it comes to informing family voice and choice. I love all these. Look at all these incredible responses. Improving academics and looking at the school report cards as well as standardized tests, right? We need to figure out where our students are sort of struggling and then how we can support those academic needs, right? Yeah. So the most urgent need is academic help in a lot of programs, right? And so to do that, we have to go look at some of that data that we were looking at in our last session. So, an opportunity to introduce kids to new extracurricular activities and cultural programs. That's right. Get outside of your comfort zone. Find some new things that you can explore and enjoy. So, last session, we talked about using all of this data to write the needs assessment, right? All this data that we collect, we use to create a needs assessment that justifies the need for our program. Remember that we need to conduct a needs assessment because it's an important part of a successful 21st CCL program. Though when we worry about getting the program together without conducting a needs assessment first, we might be providing a fun program, but we not might not be actually hitting the needs that are required for our students. And while that's great, while we're giving them a fun place to have a good time and share experiences with each other, if we're not hitting the needs of our community, we're missing out on something that we could really be doing to benefit, you know, the society that we live in as a whole. So through these needs assessments, we gather information to narrow the gap between what is and what we want, right? Because what we want is to be able to meet those needs, but we see that there's a gap between what is and what we want the program to be, or we want our community to be. It also lets us improve the performance of our targeted stakeholders. Um, the needs assessment also helps us identify needs for staff training, right? If we see that there's a particular need in the community and our staff don't have those skills, we can coach up and train up our staff so that they have the skills necessary to meet those needs. It also lets us identify some needs for our partners and helps us design activities to meet those needs. So, particularly, for example, with a school day, right? We'll talk to our school day partners and we see that students are struggling a lot when it comes to math, particularly measurement and fractions, right? We know that when we're designing activities, that's something that we need to focus on to help support students so that they can build up those skills. So these needs assessments, they should inform the SMART goals that you write. So your SMART goals are, just as a reminder, because we've gone over this, right? But your SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. Throughout your grant application, you're going to need to write SMART goals for several different aspects of your program. So familiarizing yourself with the process is, integral. As your program continues to grow, you'll find that you'll be creating SMART goals at all levels of program, right? Um, be from intentional activity design to staff training. Their SMART goals are a useful way to make sure that you're not overreaching, but you are taking a chance. You are at least trying something. So after you're developing SMART goals, um, you're going to want to take the student needs and the student family and the student and family voice data. You're going to use that to intentionally design your program. We're going to take all of these different strands and we're going to weave them together into what will become our program. Intentional design of your program means that every component of what you do during the program time is done with a purpose, right? There is a reason that we're doing it. Even when it comes to something, like recess, like a sort of like a unstructured physical activity time. There are still ways that we can intentionally design those periods of time so that there is purpose behind them. This process is important for 21st CCLC programs because what you write into your grant application will become what you do in the program and what you'll be reporting on. And remember, this is a legally binding contract that you enter into once that grant funding is awarded. So, moving on, let's talk about the theory of change. Your grant narrative should clearly explain your theory of change. So, what is it? Theory of change, or TOC for short, is a method of explaining just how a program or an intervention is expected to lead to a specific outcome. Generally, it clarifies the broad goals and the results being sought. In this case, it's the GEPRAs. It'll provide the strategies that will be used to accomplish these goals, and it'll show how each of these strategies build on one another in order to accomplish your ultimate goal. It also explains the rationale for choosing each component of your design. And so this rationale should be linked with that data and your needs assessment, as well as research around what works best, in OST spaces. So we take the data and the needs that we have for our community, and we design our program. And each aspect of our program, we tie specifically to data points. Like, oh, okay, the reason that we're doing this in our program is because the needs assessment showed that this is a high level of need in our program, showing that every portion of your program has been designed with intentionality. When you're writing your grant application, the theory of change should inform your operational plan. So this is that point where you really dig into how you're going to accomplish your goals. You're going to, talk about the hows. We've already covered the why, so now let's dive into the hows. So, first part of that is an operational plan, right? Think of your operational plan as a link between your theory of change and the ultimate implementation. In your operational plan, you're going to tell how your activities will be implemented and by whom. Uh, that's this is the point where we begin to clarify the staff that's going to be supporting operations, like specifically what staff we're going to have doing what jobs and what aspect of the program they're going to be supporting. Your operational plan is also going to talk about how much time is going to be required. You're going to want to consider the amount of time that students need to spend on a particular activity to have the impact that you intend. For example, if you have 40 minutes of ELA on your daily schedule, but no math, what's the rationale? Research and best practices that you've used to inform this decision, right? So why would you not have the math, right? And I mean, there could be a very good reason for that. It could be like, well, our students end up, with our needs assessment and the data we collected, they have really stellar math scores when it comes to standardized testing, but they really struggle in ELA. So we want to make sure that we hit that intentionally on a daily basis. Your operational plan is also going to talk about how your partners are going to be engaged. Once you find all of those partners, you identify who they are for your program, you're going to uh, take a look at how these partners that you identified within your community during that needs assessment portion of like, reviewing your community resources, how they're going to support the accomplishment of those goals. And that community asset mapping that we were talking about in the last session is a great way to do that, right? Because it's very easy to get into the weeds when it comes to just how many different community assets there are available to you. And lastly, your operational plan is going to talk about what's needed to implement the activities. So this is going to include things like a research-based curriculum, right, that supports the needs that you're addressing, but also whatever supplies you might need to implement this operational plan. And then this operational plan you're going to take that and that's going to inform your budget narrative. So all these pieces just sort of fit together sequentially. So let's go over a few additional tips for telling your OST story, right? Telling the story of what your program is going to do and how impactful it's going to be to your community. You're going to want to include your expertise, right? While you might not be running a program yet, right, because you're applying for the grant, you believe that you can effectively carry out this work. So be sure to include why your organization and your proposed staff are qualified to manage this investment. But not just that, why the people that you've chosen they're qualified to make a positive impact on you, like how they are going to positively impact the youth that's in your program. It's also important to include partnerships role. In addition to partners that are going to help facilitate your activities, you want to include the roles that those partners are going to play. This can be, how you're going to work together, and it's going to talk about how you're going to make the biggest possible impact for your youth. This person is going to help supplement our, math curriculum. This person is going to help come in and talk about, mindfulness and SEL. This person is going to, come in and talk to our families about financial resources. You're also going to want to emphasize sustainability and the long-term impact of your program. You want to start planning for the sustainability of your program even when you're applying for the grant. The earlier you start thinking about sustainability, the easier it's going to be. So when you're having these conversations with administrators or partners for your potential sites, you want to start putting together those MOUs that we were talking about, those memorandums of understanding that we talked about in the previous session. So the statute calls for applicants to submit a plan describing how the activities funded through their community learning center will continue after the funding ends, right? There's no specific requirement to sustain the program at a certain level, only that applicants must describe their plans. So it's okay to say, well, listen, once the grant ends, if we don't get renewed for a grant, then we're going to keep doing the program, but it's going to be, at a slightly diminished capacity. That's okay. But you have to describe what that's going to look like and how that's going to work for your plan. Grant reviewers are going to be looking for this plan when they're scoring your applications. So putting a bunch of thought into it now and ensuring that it's not just another thing to do or like a box that you're checking off, but making it part of your actual operation plan from the beginning will help you to live out the plan if it's rewarded, right? It'll help you, in the long run, also when it comes to identifying ways that you can keep your program going even after your funding might end. So I know that was a lot that we just threw at you. So just real quick in the chat box, give us a like 1 or 2 sentence reason why your expertise and track record make you a good candidate for a 21st CCLC grant. And it can be a lot of things, right? It can be your expertise and experience in education or working with children. It can be, knowledge of a certain aspect of child development. So I know that this is a something you're going to want to take a second to craft. So while you do, Shanika, do you have any other ideas?
Not so much as an idea, because I know we're gonna get into we're gonna dig a little bit more into those different ideas that can inform our grant writing. But there was a question in the chat around whether or not needs assessments are being funded or a part of the grant application. And just huge shout out to Deanna for responding. But a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today is just us encouraging you to take those additional steps so that you can become awarded, right? We definitely want to submit a grant application that will result in us getting that award. And so us creating our grants based on these needs, or if you are looking at the RFP for your state and you recognize that they are highlighting special or priority areas, that's definitely something you want to consider to incorporate into your plan. But let's see. There's a couple of responses already coming in. Now, some of you
Mm-hmm.
probably already have a presence in the community, so it makes sense as to why you would support 21st Century in that community so that you can reach youth and families. But there's a number of responses. For example, let me scroll to the top. Some of you have experienced staff and success stories from parents. That's definitely something that you would want to brag about, right? It's definitely something that you want to just raise up to the top. Attendance continues to rise. That's great, Nancy. All right. That's one of the many issues that a lot of programs are experiencing, right? They are recruiting students. Sometimes the issue is keeping them within programming. So if you have that expertise or that track record, that is definitely something that you would want to incorporate in your plan so that, again, you get awarded, right? Because that's our goal here. But the way you are writing this grant narrative, it has to be compelling, right? So that's where that data and all those needs assessments kind of come into play. I see a
All
number
right.
of
Yeah, a number of
There's
great
lots of great
responses. Yeah.
sharing.
Mm-hmm. A lot of different ways in which we're, expressing the expertise that we have. I love some of the comments here around flexibility too, being able to shift track based on community needs and forming program to meet those needs, like Jeremiah is saying. Um, And then, yeah, and I love what Sherry's saying here, right? You work in a highly impacted school, um, and you see the impact that after school programs make on families and how desperately it's needed. So you have not just a passion, but you have experience with just how impactful those things can be. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for sharing. You want to think about how you can include these stories into your grant narrative, and then how you can also back them up with the needs assessment, the data that you collected, right? So this is our expertise. This is how it's meeting the needs that we've already identified in our community, right? Tying all of those things together, just so that you're, citing your sources, so to speak. It's my old English teacher coming out of me. All right, so let's go ahead and move on. Let's talk about some 21st century skills, right? So the 21st century community learning centers all strive to support schools in providing fair and equitable and high quality education for all youth to close achievement gaps. That's our goal, right? So how do we do this? We do it by building 21st century skills. So what skills do you believe young people need to be successful in the 21st century? Right? Let's talk about that for a minute. What skills do you guys think young people need to be successful in the 21st century? While we're waiting for some comments to come in, I know, to me, I think perhaps the most important 21st century skill that we can teach students is the ability to communicate with each other. Um, in various ways. It could be, short communication, like we see in social media, but like actually being able to sit down and have a conversation, even if that's a hard conversation to have with people. That's a soft skill that doesn't often get, addressed a lot. And so that's something that we, as out of school time providers, can help to support for our students. Let's see what, oh, social emotional skills and self-confidence. Absolutely. Absolutely. I love grit, right? I love this idea that we need to teach students how to tolerate failure, right? It's okay if something is hard. You don't give up, you just keep trying, right? You work at it little by little, and then eventually you're going to be making progress. Literacy, flexibility, resilience. Yes, absolutely. Flexibility and resilience, particularly, in our world that feels increasingly smaller because of, social media and like, digital, communication. It's really important to be flexible and resilient. Just being able to bounce back and then pivot when it comes to something that, a challenge or roadblock that might come up, instead of just sort of throwing up our hands and be like, oh well, I guess we can't do that. And then those critical thinking skills, Alicia, absolutely go along with that, and that creativity. Awesome. These are all amazing 21st century skills that students are going to need to learn. And it's a combination of hard skills and soft skills, right? Because we need that combination in order to be successful, in any workplace, whatever we're going on to do in our lives. We need to have these skills, particularly, these soft skills that we might not necessarily get the kind of reinforcement that is necessary in the school day. So we, as 21st century providers, have the opportunity to support students when it comes to those kinds of things. So when we talk about 21st CCLC skills, we talk about things like, communication, where students share their thoughts and their questions, all their solutions. That ability to collaborate too is part of communication, right? Because if you can't communicate, you can't collaborate, which is another really key skill. And then, of course, things like our critical thinking and creativity, like we were just talking about. All these skills should be at the heart of your program, right? You need to highlight in your application how your program's activities will support these, right? Pointing out how your programs are intentionally designed and the activities in your programs are intentionally designed to support these skills. And then with all of this information, like now that we've gathered all of these things together in our toolbox, then we can dive into the phase of implementation. So now that we reviewed some of the background about the learning priorities of the 21st C programs, and we know about the people in the room, our partners, we're ready to develop an understanding of 21st CCLC. So when we talk about 21st C programs, we talk about three phases for implementing those programs once you get that grant. And those phases are the planning phase, the designing phase, and the continuing phase. So we'll review all three of these sections today, but we're going to pay particular attention to the planning phase of your 21st CCLC, right? We're going to focus on this element because, as prospective grantees, if you don't organize your program from the outset, you may encounter more challenges during the implementation phase. But if you have all of your ducks in a row, so to speak, from the beginning, then it should be pretty smooth sailing. So let's start with planning our 21st CCLC program. These are the three elements of planning a 21st C program. First, we're going to talk about reviewing the RFP or your RFA or whatever it's called in your state, right? You always want to return to that, and everything in your program should be aligned with the legislative and regulatory priorities from the federal and state level. When you write your grant, it's really important to keep in mind that if your grant's accepted, your grant becomes a legal agreement between your program and the state education agency. And that means that you're obligated to carry out the proposal that you, or maybe, sometimes previous program leadership submitted. So some of the things that you want to focus on include the state requirements and state priorities, as well as the federal requirements and priorities that are present. You also want to bring your stakeholders together, right? Because you can't do it on your own. You can do a lot, but trying to do it on your own, you're going to run yourself ragged and you're going to burn yourself out, which is a really, uh, it's an actual thing that happens when it comes to, especially when it comes to implementing programs and jumping in. Like you get so excited, your grant's awarded, you're like, all right, let's do it, and you dive in and you're like, I'm going to do all of this myself, and then you are deflated, you're exhausted, and then you don't have that mental energy to make sure that you're staying ahead and planning for future uh, challenges or just like future activities. So you want to bring those stakeholders together. It's called community learning centers for a reason, right? You may have heard the old sort of tired proverb that it takes a whole village to raise one child, but it's just as true today as it was when that proverb was first uttered. In many ways, you'll need to embrace this idea, right? And encourage your stakeholders as a community to build your program together, right? You're going to make sure that they know that they are part of this program the same way you are, the same way the families are, the same way the kiddos are. And that the program will be more successful with their input. So, ways that you can do this, right? As potential grantees, it's important to recognize that school day staff, like your principals, counselors, teachers, education leads, and don't forget operation staff like maintenance and food service and transportation staff. All these people are going to be vital partners in your program. Their involvement will be essential for gathering and sharing data, but also coordinating the use of space, aligning program expectations, maintaining clear communication, and promoting a cohesive program culture. That operation staff part is really key. I used to say when running programs that the people that I take care of most are the custodial staff and the secretaries, right? Because they know where all the things are, they know how to help you out, and most often they're there after a lot of the other school day staff has left, right? So when it's just like you and the kiddos in your program space, sometimes these people are still around so that you can tap on them, if you need something. You also want to ensure a strong partnership, and so to do that, you're going to want to establish a memorandum of understanding, like we talked about last session. You're going to do that whether your partner operates within a school or a community-based organization. just so that we're all clear on what our purpose is and how we are functioning in the program. Additionally, you might want to include staff from local private schools to help facilitate outreach to their students, expanding the reach and effectiveness of your program, right? Just making sure you cast an even wider net to bring in as many kids as you can to serve your program or that your program can serve. You also want to think about finding partners in your community-based organizations, businesses, and nonprofits, right? Not just your school-based organizations. They can really play a huge role in helping reach these goals that you might have for your program. They help you understand the community needs because they have their fingers on the pulse of the community. Um, and they can share resources and contribute to sustainability planning, right? Knowing that you have the opportunity to partner with this organization or that organization to help supplement these things, particularly once grant funding runs out and you don't have those resources available to you. Again, you're going to want to utilize one of those MOUs and joint grant applications and letters of support to formalize these relationships, right? So you want to lean on these partners and you want to include them in all the grant writing process. You want to work together throughout the application process, and that'll strengthen the partnership by setting and understanding the relationship even before the grant's awarded. Also, families play a crucial role in your future program, and they can contribute in a bunch of different ways. As prospective grantees, it's important to consider how you'll engage with families as active participants, but not just participants, but supporters and really ultimately partners in your program. Families can provide valuable input, and you can collect that a bunch of different ways. You can do it via surveys, whatnot that you've submitted as part of your needs assessment. But you could just also do that through word of mouth, like we were talking about earlier. Just having those conversations with your parents when they come to pick up, the kids. And these kinds of things, this input that you get from your families, can point you to the specific needs of your community, so that your activities are purposed to meet those needs. This makes their involvement key in creating a well-rounded and effective program, right? Because if you don't take into account the family needs and the family voice, then you're really not serving the whole part. You're serving the student, but you're not serving the family and ultimately the larger community. Families provide the buy-in for your program, and they can help spread that to others. The word of mouth from one parent saying, "Oh my God, little Tyler is having so much fun at the after-school program," and not just that, but his math scores have come up. Just having that conversation with a couple of other parents, you'd be surprised how frequently that leads to more people or more students in your program. They're also Families are also essential to your needs assessment, which supports all that ongoing recruitment and retention. So finally, students play a huge role, right? Obviously, they provide student voice and they help promote student retention, right? So if we listen to what our students want to learn about, what their interests are, and the activities that they want to do, and we use that to inform our planning process when it comes to intentional activity design, then not only are we going to retain more of our students, but we are also going to grow our numbers, because the same way that families talk, students will talk. I can't tell you how many times I had a kid join my after school program and they're like, "Oh, well, Sally said that she had so much fun here all the time that I begged my mom to let me come." It's like, "Oh, okay, great. Welcome. I'm glad to have another student here." So, as prospective grantees, it's crucial to create a comprehensive needs assessment. The programs you design and implement should be directly addressing the needs that you identified in that needs assessment. So while a needs assessment is typically conducted during the preparation of your initial application for funding, you're also going to want to regularly reevaluate those needs throughout your program's implementation to ensure that your program remains responsive and relevant to students, families, and communities you serve. Regularly updating your needs assessment will allow you to adapt and refine your approach for greater impact. I mean, let's be real. The idea is we identify a need, we start supporting that need, and then eventually that need is going to lessen because we're supporting that need. So then we need to take a look at, okay, well, how can we pivot in our program to help support another need that might be, a greater need in our community now that we've already started supporting this previous need. So if your grant is awarded, one of your first steps should be to create a basic operational plan. We always emphasize the importance of planning for long-term program success, right? But you want to start that planning as early as possible. So we'll review the elements of an operational plan that you should have in place for a successful program. We'll dive into that right now. But before we do that, I just want to share a couple of resources here with you. You can learn more about needs assessments right here at this link right here. And if you want to dig into partnerships, we have another great resource right here in our archives for you. So we're just going to share those right there. Just some more resources for you guys to dig your teeth into. And now I will hand it over to Shanika.
Awesome. Thank you, Chaz. What I'll share, it may seem like a review for a number of you, and I definitely encourage you to share your thoughts and input as we talk about the design aspect of writing an effective needs assessment and writing an effective grant proposal. So whether you are a returning program looking to apply again, or you're a prospective grantee, it's really important that, again, that you focus on the data so that you can develop the necessary needs, and those needs will inform what goals you are going to create for your program. And like what Chaz mentioned before, we're really aiming to develop intentional activities that will help us accomplish those different goals. Right. So what we'll do is just jump right into that data piece again. Right. Now, this was something that was already mentioned in the chat. So I'm happy to see that there's some transfer of learning already happening here. We are already aware that there are various types of data, right, to help us better understand those needs of our students, our families, and our communities. And what you all discussed in the last session, you talked about those two types of data, right? We have our quantitative data, which refers to those measurable numbers, right? We're talking about attendance rates, and I think this popped up in the chat as well. We're also looking at test scores, whether it's from on the school level or the state level. But we're also looking at the number of incidents or events that are occurring, right? So all of those different types of numbers allow us to track the different patterns or measure progress with our program. And then we're able to kind of compare what is happening over time, right? So again, this is very useful when it comes to identifying those different trends or gaps in performances that can be used as we develop those intentional activities or develop those targeted interventions that you may have planned for your program. Now, on the other hand, and this is an area that I myself have seen a lot of people struggle with, right? We always focus on numbers. Yes, when we think about data, we automatically think about numbers, but qualitative data is also a very important piece of information, right? This provides us some insight on data that is more subjective, but equally valuable, right? So we aren't looking at concrete numbers like quantitative data. We are looking more for the types of feedback that we can get from youth or from parents or from the community. This may look like us conducting focus groups or sharing open-ended surveys so that we can get responses that'll eventually inform our whole grant or our proposal or our plan for those different activities, right? So this also helps us to better understand the context behind the numbers that we are seeing in the quantitative data, right? So qualitative data is just as important, but we're also using qualitative data to kind of dig into those personal experiences, right? We definitely want to hear more about those different perspectives from different populations, our different stakeholders. We're also hearing more about the needs that they are expressing, right? And this may not be captured in that quantitative data alone, right? So again, this type of data is really important for us to understand the why so that we know how, right? The how behind how we are going to address these different items and hopefully address and shed light on the outcomes, right, for our program so that we are responsive. And what I've noticed is that we kind of dig into all of these different types of data here, right? We have our different levels. We have our school and community level data. We have our student level data. We have our student and family voice data. It's really about, how we can take that and implement that feedback wherever we may get it, depending on the type of data, right? Or that type of information. So as we pull these different levels of data, again, we are focused on the information that will help us to directly tie those student needs, whether it's, from, again, one of those three levels, but we're going to tie it to what we can provide or how we can provide support to address those different needs, right? And as we dig through those different levels of data, it'll also help us to identify the specific needs that we can address, whether it's through our own resources once we are awarded, or it's through a partnership, right? So again, we're kind of coming back to like a full circle of what was already shared earlier with Chaz or in the past session. So these things may look like a number of needs, right? So as you dig into the data, you may realize that, yes, I do need to provide an opportunity for youth to practice life skills or basic skills, right? Some of you mentioned health and wellness or safety as a need or as a finding that you have noticed through just looking through your own sets of data, right? That's all of those things are really important. Some of you may have been able to identify patterns in behaviors. Some of you are also looking at how you can get to the root causes so that your program, again, is being developed in a manner that is intentional about how you are addressing those different needs, right? So again, we're pulling data from all three of those levels, and that will help inform our grant, but also make it a compelling grant, right? We're really focused on those needs. And a lot of our RFPs or RFAs or those applications that the states are putting out, they kind of hint towards this, right? Some of them may ask specific questions around specific activities that they would like to see programs implement. So that may be something that you kind of start with to guide how you dig into those different types of data. But again, there's a lot of information here that can inform a compelling grant. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. And again, there are resources that Chaz shared, but I don't want to, spend too much time there, right? I definitely want to emphasize, though, those needs assessments, right? So thinking about the data that you're digging into, and some of you already shared this, which is great. But as you kind of review those need statements, and you're developing a needs assessment, here are some just guiding questions to help you answer how you'll implement that how. Right, we're using how a lot today. So in the chat box, right, we've already talked about Chaz have already talked about how we can conduct a needs assessment in the last session. Here, we're more focused on how we can develop those assessments into statements, right? So you may be at a point where you can already share what you are prioritizing in your potential program based on those needs assessments. And you can definitely let us know in the chat box. But if you've, so like I mentioned before, so if you've already pulled together some insights based on the data and the needs assessment that you're already pulling together, again, let us know in the chat box. But I would also like to hear more about the types of activities or experiences you would like your students and families to have in your program based on this data and those needs that are being addressed. So again, you can share with me in the chat what are some activities or experiences you would like your future students and families to experience in your program based on what you are finding. So again, here are some questions to kind of pull together the data and your needs assessments and pulling it all together into a statement here, right? What are the overall trends you're seeing? And I think this is something that was already shared in the chat, right? Around the different skills that are needed. You notice that a lot of your youth may need support with health. Mental health is also another area. Some of you may have a program that you would like to focus on supporting youth and getting into the pipeline of the workforce, right? Or maybe you're thinking about college and careers, right? What's needed for the long-term improvement of these needs, right? What skills do students need to meet standards, especially if you are ensuring that you are aligning your program with the school day, right? What's your plan around helping to improve those state assessments or improve report card grades, or maybe it's behavior, right? What activities do students say they want, right? This is something that's coming from that qualitative data piece, right? Which of these activities can you actually accommodate in your program? So the list can go on, but let me just double check really quick. So we're talking about enrichment activities whose parents can't afford for them to have, such as playing guitar or other instruments, learning how to play football, soccer, volleyball. Awesome, right? We're talking about just a number of things here. Exposure to STEM career exploration opportunities is really important. Like what many of you mentioned earlier today, our society, is definitely digging deeper into the technology realm, right? But of course, that is a perfect opportunity for us to continue to emphasize those different skills like critical thinking, right? We ask ourselves the why and the how. We definitely want to make sure youth can also ask themselves, how do I know this information is reliable, right? How can I take the skills that I'm learning in this program and apply it to my future career as a young professional or personal, right? What else is out there? A lot of different things. Oh, great. Lots of enrichment, student support and vocational education. Thank you for sharing that, Melissa. That's awesome. Giving students more enrichment. Yep. So that is at the top of mind, especially from what we're finding. Ooh, executive functioning and study skills. That is at the top of my list. And for those of you who are running programs to support like the youth workforce in general, that may be like at the top of your list as well, right? We definitely want to run programs that are, of course, uh, addressing those academic needs, but we're also about thinking about the needs that we need to address so that youth are graduating from school prepared and ready to go as a global citizen. If they are jumping straight into college or the workforce, we may have some young entrepreneurs, we may have people who are interested in trades, but they may not be aware of those things if we aren't already building those skills and providing different exposure opportunities, right? All right, so we have our needs statements, right? And these statements are deeply rooted in the data that we've been pulling. Again, we are highly encouraging you to develop needs assessments so that you can create a targeted plan for your grant and eventually intentional activities. We definitely want to take some time to make sure that we are using SMART goals, right? We always say, we always share about all of the things that we wish to do, but sometimes not all of it can be accomplished, right? Or we aren't aware of it not being accomplished because we're doing so many great things, right? And that's where the SMART goals kind of come into play here, right? Now, developing SMART goals for some programs may be a challenge area, but it really requires some extra time with planning, right? Because these SMART goals will not only inform your program goals, it'll also help you to inform those intentional activities that you are implementing or you are proposing to implement under this grant, right? And so when we develop SMART goals, we want to make sure these SMART goals are specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, they're relevant, and they're time bound. So let's take a look at what this can look like for a lot of our programs. So here is an example SMART goal. And what I would like to do is I'm just going to address certain areas of this SMART goal. Now, for some people, they think that based on this acronym, the way you develop the SMART goal, it has to be in that order, but not necessarily, right? It depends on what exactly you would like to address. So here we have 60% of regularly attending fourth grade students will improve their math skills as measured by state math assessments. Now we're thinking about, again, SMART goals here, right? How is it specific? We know it's specific because it's targeting sixth grade students, but not just sixth grade students, the ones who are regularly attending our program, right? We know that this is measurable because we're saying that it will be measured by state math assessments. And this is something that we can come back to measure the progress or improvements that we are contributing to because of our program. We know it's achievable because we have a number here that we said that we will be able to achieve. Now, for some of your programming, you may think about, well, how can I make sure this is achievable? So that's one thing that I probably would have add on to this, right? How do I know it's achievable, or when will I know it has been achieved, right? Is it relevant? Depending on the data, we may realize that a lot of our fourth grade students are struggling with math. And so that's why we are targeting those math skills, right? Is it time bound, right? That piece is missing. So we would definitely add some component of a timeline or a time frame with this, right? So by the end of this school year, we're going to add that in there. So in overall, it'll say 60% of regularly attending fourth grade students will improve their math skills as measured by the end of the school year state math assessments, right? So definitely think about the data that you're collecting now that informs your program plan. That will also be a part of your program SMART goals that you are going to develop. Because again, if we're saying that we're going to do all of these great things, we definitely want to make sure that we're meeting those goals, right? We're achieving them. We want to see progress, right? We have proof of this progress, right? And then, of course, the specific part is very, very important. We definitely don't want to have a vague SMART goal because we really won't be able to pull the right data that we need to address that progress. So here's another one, right? Now, this one's more focused on family engagement. And you can let me know in the chat box, right, whether or not this is an ideal SMART goal. So here we have 75% of participating families will attend at least 3 out of the 4 family engagement workshops planned throughout the year. Is this an ideal SMART goal if we're thinking about family engagement? And for those of you who have run a 21st C program before, you probably have a lot of experience around this, especially with family engagement, right? Yes. Not ideal. Yes, absolutely, right? You can't, it may not be an ideal SMART goal because again, we're thinking about how we can get parents to actually participate, right? That may be an area where we can't say that this is achievable, right? We're thinking about the different steps it would take to get the parents in the door. And so you may realize from the data, of course, right? What exactly are parents looking for when it comes to engagement, right? What's preventing them from attending your family engagement events, right? Sherry, great question, right? What are the workshops? Are they relevant? Thank you, right? It's missing that relevance piece. And so Here's a quick little update, right? 75% of participating families will attend at least 3 out of the 4 family engagement workshops to improve homework help at home planned throughout the school year, right? That's really important that we're specific on the workshops that we would like to address. Now here, where it says 3 out of 4 family engagement workshops, some states are requiring you to host a certain number of family engagement activities. Our goal is to have activities that are focused on what families actually need. And in this case, it may be homework help, right? Especially if, and this may be my 4th grade teacher brain, I had a lot of families who were struggling with long division, right? They would avoid me every Saturday school, like, I'm stressed out about this math homework. Long division looks totally different now. I just need to focus on how to relearn this. They're on YouTube and things like that. And so I would host little mini sessions around what long division looks like in the classroom, but also have them engage in the activities that youth were engaged in when it comes to long division, right? So again, you're pulling in what family needs are, and you're kind of, again, intentionally planning these activities that would support those needs, but also all of this is being pulled from the data that you've already pulled before to address the needs that families are experiencing. And then we're also talking about how or what types of activities we can actually implement here, right? So here's another one. You all let me know, is this an ideal SMART goal? 60% of students will reduce the number of discipline referrals. Nope. I agree, right? There are a number of things missing here, right? Thank you, Jeremiah. It isn't really time bound, right? Like, when are we expecting the change to occur, right? When can we see progress that has been made, right? We're also not really specific around students. Attendance will look different across the board, especially if we think about our younger students versus our older youth, right? So this SMART goal can be improved by a number of things, right? I think it was like missing a lot of components of a SMART goal. So now we're saying 60% of regularly attending 5th grade students will reduce their number of discipline referrals, comparing the number this year from the previous year as a result of SEL instruction. Now, I really like this SMART goal because not only do we have numbers to let us know, this is the look for when it comes to that quantitative data, but we're also including how we can make this achievable in our program plan, right? What activities will we need to implement to make sure we are going to hit the mark when it comes to the SMART goal, right? So we know that when we plan intentional activities, that SEL instruction is going to be important because that is where we would like to address those discipline referrals, right? Now, these are, of course, just some examples of SMART goals. But again, as you can see, a lot of it is linked right back to those first steps that we are encouraging everyone to take, and that is to dig into that data, develop those needs assessments, create a needs statement, right? All of those things come into play. Family members should also be included in these events, and their attendance should count in the SMART goal. Absolutely, because a lot of change can also happen at home, right? But we need to support our families in this change so that everything is consistent. And I'll also tag in school day, right? We definitely want to align with the school day so that we can continue to support those necessary skills that students need, right? So let me go back to this image here, right? So again, we're starting from that data piece where we're collecting student needs. We're also tuning into, student voice, student and family voice. We're developing program SMART goals. These goals are going to help us to intentionally design these activities. And of course, we have an overarching SMART goal for our program. We would need a SMART goal for each activity, right? Because again, we want to make sure that we can measure progress. But as you are writing your grant, you really want to keep in mind what you are proposing to do, and then how you are going to follow up, because that is going to be extremely important here. All right, so we have a couple more examples. We'll just walk through just a couple of them, but I just want to show you how this kind of all show up together, these different pieces can come into alignment here, right? So again, we're starting with those needs and that voice. We're pulling data from everywhere. We realize that, and again, this is just an example here. The need is to reduce errors in multiplication and division, understand area, sometimes parameter for some of our students, right? And from student and family voice, they are interested in earning money. Who isn't? Magic, sports math, cooking, and experiments, right? So we have an idea of what can be addressed in our grant proposal, but also what can be addressed in the different activities we are proposing to have within our program so that youth and their families can experience. Then we're thinking about our program SMART goals, right? Because again, we definitely want to measure our progress. So here's a SMART goal based on the needs and voice, right? 60% of regularly attending fourth grade students will improve their math skills as measured by the end of the school year state math assessment. Now, there are a couple of things I do want to identify here, right? Sometimes when it comes to your needs and your voice, this may already be identified in your RFP, but again, this depends on your state. Some of your states may have priority areas that you may want to prioritize within what you're proposing for your program, right? Now, another thing that you definitely want to keep in mind of is the regularly attending piece, right? Sometimes your state would have this outlined, right? They may have a set number or a long-term outcome for all programs. That's definitely something you want to keep in mind. It's also really important that we define attendance when it comes to our program, right? What would we consider a regularly attending youth, right? That will definitely help us to measure the progress of our plan as we, develop it. And it's also helpful for those who are coming in. They may not have been a part of the grant writing process, but if they have this, they have an understanding of what needs to be addressed or what was proposed to be addressed through this grant. All right, from there, you have your intentional design piece, right? We are going to have an entrepreneurship club in year one. Students will build a snack kiosk, develop a budget, make food to sell or not sell, right? Maybe this is more about a career exposure activity and run the snack kiosk. So those of you who would like to prioritize college and career readiness or opportunities, this entrepreneurship club will be focused on those different job roles, different tasks, the different skills, those soft and hard skills, right? Executive functioning skills, all of that will come into play here. But they're also learning about what additional skills that may not be available to them just yet that they could attain from attending a four-year college or a community college, or maybe this is something that they can attain from a trade school of some sort, or maybe it's a class around how to start a business, right? How can we develop a business plan that will include us creating snacks or a snack kiosk to help address a special population in our community, right? There's a lot of different ways you can kind of intentionally design your program so that when you think about those activities, you can pull apart different parts of that activity and use SMART goals to measure that progress, right? So here, a SMART goal for that activity would be 90% of students who participate in the club regularly will demonstrate an increase in the proficient use of fractions as demonstrated by a scored rubric, right? Now, this is very specific. I always emphasize the achievable part. We know this is achievable because we are using a number of things to help us measure success here, right? That's including that rubric. And that rubric can also help us measure whether or not youth are actually attaining those different skills, right? So I shared a lot there. All right, so that was an example. And what we'll do is we're coming up on time. Continue to share what you are already putting together for your grant. If you've gotten to the point where you are already planning out the types of activities that you would like in your program, definitely let us know in the chat because I definitely see a lot of great topics that you can address in your proposal. It's all about how we can make sure we're intentionally designing it from start to finish, right? We have these great ideas. We want to make sure that these activities align with our overall program SMART goal. And of course, those activities will have its own SMART goal that will eventually, that also gets addressed, right? So again, you have that overarching SMART goal, the activities that will help us address or achieve that SMART goal. And then within those, that intentional designing, we have those activities that also have those SMART goals, right? Now, speaking of activity, let's talk about activity types, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass it back over to Chaz.
All right. So there are several different types of activities that you can use to help students master their knowledge and skills that they need to achieve their academic standards, and their state assessments, and just in general become successful in life, right? Which is our ultimate goal. So here are four different activity types that you might want to consider. So academic intervention. So this might look like additional instruction and support that supplements the general instruction from the school day. And it's intended to improve a student's academic performance. Best practice is to do this in a blended learning environment where students are sort of moving around from station to station. And this allows the teacher to work with small groups to really get in there for their interventions. Academic enrichment, they're activities that cover topics that students are interested in and embeds opportunities for students to practice and master the new knowledge and skills that they're learning in their interventions in new and relevant ways. College and career connections link activities to opportunities that will expand on post-secondary education or career opportunities. Now, family engagement requires increasing family involvement in academic intervention or enrichment activities to improve student learning. And of course, everybody's favorite, recreation can include sports, but it's an important way to help students practice a wide variety of skills and to be healthy. So you want to keep in mind that family engagement's more than just involvement, right? Finding ways for families to be partners in your work is really when you get families engaged. Family engagement activities are more than just involvement in academic or student learning. Engagement activities also include activities that help parents or caretakers increase their own knowledge and skills through literacy, ESL, parenting skills, and fiscal skills. So those can be programs that you can also provide to your family. So over the next few slides, we're going to cover a couple of concrete examples of what this could look like in your program. So let's take a look at some academic intervention, right? Academic intervention in your future program. It could look like direct instruction or blended instruction. It could also be a mixture of both. As you consider these types of academic interventions in your program, also be thinking about staffing to support these activities. For this type of instruction, educators are ideal to lead these types of activities since they're familiar with standards, strategies, and supports needed to move the needle. Um, though it's not necessary for staff to be educators, it is a consideration as prospective applicants when you think about what you're writing in your grant applications. Deciding on what activities you'll include alongside what staffing will be needed will help you articulate your plan and the needs more clearly when you're writing your application. So direct instruction provides, well, direct instruction to help students learn knowledge and skills that meet academic content standards. Now, blended instruction is what we often see in out of school time programs. This approach is the most common in programs, and it features a teacher and an aide to support low teacher to student ratio. In a blended instruction environment, you're going to see several stations scattered around your program space, and they're dedicated to different types of academic support. So, for example, you could have a guided learning or reciprocal learning station. So, this kind of station allows a teacher to interact with each student And you want to make sure to keep this station to only a couple students, just so that you allow for that individualized instruction. And you want to give students opportunities to interact with each other. Now, your homework station allows your students to complete their school day assignments, which, when you're running programs, is something that you're going to constantly hear from, your families. But more importantly, it also lets them develop skills and understanding in areas where they're struggling. Um, you could have posters in this area that reinforce like a growth mindset to support students in their efforts in learning, right? Build that resilience part, give them some more grit. Like, you can do this. You might be struggling now, but you're not going to be struggling forever. So keep at it, keep practicing and trying. So our game station, this could include literacy, math, or science games that focus on specific student needs. You want to think about different board games that reinforce scientific concepts, ball games that help with reading, bowling focused on numbers or addition, sort of like math concepts and stuff like that. Your technology station. This is a place where you could have an interactive whiteboard to support games where students have to work together to solve and learn in a fun, engaging way. And your computer stations, right? So this examples of effective use of a computer station include skill or content specific software that you've downloaded onto computers for students to work with, using headphones. As a general rule, you're going to want to utilize software that enables teachers to run reports on student progress and set lessons so that students can work on their specified areas of need. And having something that can run reports lets you gather that data to show that there's improvement being achieved. All right, so let's move on to academic enrichment. So any fun activity in your program can get turned into academic enrichment. Academic enrichment is the opportunity for allowing students to practice and master skills in real life and in a relevant way. When we plan for academic enrichment, we're also tying in our student voice that we've pulled from our data. So we're going to watch a video from our summer learning initiative.
Intentional activity design, in my opinion, is probably the most important step. That is where the rubber meets the road. And we take all of that needs assessment data and we figure out how to create activities for them that will help them build those skills.
So what we're really going to look at today with the intentional design is taking those needs that we know they have and that we've developed into those programmatic SMART goals and blending it with those pieces that we know they really want. So that student voice piece. So now we get to the really fun part of planning your program. What are your students interested in? What do they want to be involved in? What's going to get them in the door and excited every day?
As educators, we often get caught up in our day-to-day work. So when we say the word intentionality to our grantees, they have a light bulb moment, because what we're stressing is that they think deeply through every stage of this game. When they provide an activity for students, that's going to lead to some sort of positive student outcomes.
The kids have had a great time filming. They kept saying, we want to make movies, we want to make movies, they love that aspect of recording themselves and watching themselves. If we could figure out a way to have kids summarize, but do it in either a book trailer or some activity like that.
What have we been practicing summarizing for? Our commercials. What are our commercials going to be about?
The book. This book is called The Napping Couch by Audrey Wood.
From the beginning, I wanted to encompass it in everything we did, that we were putting the kids' voice at the forefront. And not just think, we know what they want because we had that data to back it up.
You should read The Napping Couch. It's a good book. It's the best book ever, actually. Yeah.
Oftentimes when kids hear summer school, they want to run the other direction. They're no different than we are as adults. We engage in the things that are meaningful to us.
3, 2, 1.
Thank you for waking up with us.
So we're showing that When you provide activities that kids want and you embed the academic skills that they need, they're going to be much more likely to want to learn.
Did you know that police dogs have been trained to help police officers?
When we give those kids the opportunity to learn hands-on activities, it takes it to a higher level. We're not giving them a piece of information and saying, okay, now give it back to us. It absolutely changed our summer school.
A beach bag.
Cut.
Awesome. So that's just an example of how, we can provide academic enrichment in whatever activities we're doing. But let's expand our academic intervention and enrichment activities by linking post-secondary education and career opportunities. You want to be sure that you're making college and career connections that are age appropriate. And students in elementary should understand that there are different kinds of jobs. They should have opportunities to explore their interests and develop basic skills. Students in middle school should know what types of classes they need to take in middle and high school that'll help them prepare for higher education if that's their desired path. They should develop good study skills or work habits during that, right? Our high school students should know how to apply for college and how to fill out job applications and other necessary employment documents and paperwork. So as you plan college and career readiness programming, consider these three types of activities. Awareness, to provide opportunities for students to learn about themselves, real world jobs, job expectations, and education and career options. Exploration activities to provide opportunities for students to actively explore education and career options to see what sparks their interest and which options seem like they're a good fit. And preparation, right? Activities to provide opportunities for students to develop the knowledge and skills and plans that are going to help them move forward in their career goals. So let's talk a little bit about family engagement. You want to add a family engagement component to your academic enrichment activities to increase student learning at home as well as in the program. So we'll be diving into more family engagement stuff in our next section of this series. But for today, I just want to establish that these activities are for student academic improvement and to help families in their own learning and literacy too. True family engagement is more than just one-time events. Family engagement is ongoing. So you want to provide activities and information for families, such as academic content support and training such as homework workshops, information about creating an ideal home environment that supports learning and what families can do to support learning at home outside of just homework, right? You also want to think about how to connect with the school day by connecting school day content to program activities and how families can be involved in the continuous line from school to after school to home. And you also want to demonstrate how 21st C activities build on what students learn at school by showing them how the activities that you offer build up students' academic, social, emotional skills, and that the program's more than just aftercare. So, but again, we'll talk more about family engagement next week. I'm gonna pass it back off to Shanika.
All right, so we covered a lot today. What we'll do is we'll drop our feedback form in the chat. I know a lot of you probably have to leave because programming is starting for you, right? So definitely take a quick minute or two to fill out our feedback form. But I do want to take some time to just cover a few grant writing tips that you can implement right away. And again, it's to review that RFP or your RFA, depending on how your state is addressing it, that grant application, and understand the priorities, right? If there's a special interest in a need, make sure that you are able to address that need in your proposal. And again, it should be data-driven, right? Spend the necessary time to pull the data, develop those needs assessments, and develop those needs statements so that it can inform your planning. We're also encouraging you to avoid any jargon, right? Some of our community-based organizations or LEAs, sometimes they use jargon that is specific to their own fields. It's really important that we are writing our grant in a way where everyone can understand it, especially since your grant may be entering in a certain review process where you have other people who are reviewing it and scoring it, right? Now, with that being said, you should also make sure that it should be written by someone who knows your organization's needs as they relate to the students and families that you are hoping to serve through this grant, right? It should also be written by someone who understands OST, right? And understands how those different things can be applied within your potential program. You also want to bear in mind, is this achievable, right? Are these plans achievable? Think about those SMART goals. What are some things that we can, or structures we can put into place to make sure it is achievable? You definitely want to focus on the application, especially the data around that, and how we are building those intentional activities around that. Right. But again, we're thinking about, is this achievable? Can it be realistically implemented if you were to be awarded? And then last but not least, someone unfamiliar should read it. Because again, we want to make sure that it is easily understood, right, by all of our stakeholders. So if you have someone who's unfamiliar with your program, read your proposal. They can help you identify where in your proposal that isn't comprehensive enough or isn't clear enough, or maybe the links to those different needs aren't clear enough. And that's when you can just go back in and make those necessary changes, right? So you may have a ton of information, but again, you definitely want to have a narrative around how you can make these different things happen. You definitely don't want the reviewer to lose connection to your proposal because they're kind of lost in the sauce, so to speak. It's also very helpful to have a rubric available. Some of these RFPs or RFAs or grant applications have some sort of rubric attached to it. Definitely take advantage of it. If you're like me, you may want to go in and kind of expand on it a little bit if you have a reader who is coming in or looking in from the outside so that they can best understand what needs to be addressed in this proposal and whether or not you're just, checking all those boxes on what's required for this grant application. All right, so we shared quite a bit here. Harvey, thank you for sharing that. Role of the education liaison is the key to aligning the school day with the program. It's early enough for you to start making those connections if you don't already have a connection to the school day. So thank you for sharing that. What we'll do is just quickly put this up on the screen. If you're here, you probably all have already seen this. A lot of the resources that we've shared so far today can be found on our website, so don't forget to take another look, especially for those of you who are looking for a recording. All of these events are recorded and will be placed on the website in the archive section. So just, become friends with the archive section if you're looking for those recordings. And of course, as always, send us an email if you have any questions, info@21stcclcntac.org. Make sure you are already signed up for our newsletter and follow us on social media if you can. Again, our feedback form is in the chat box. So please, 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 before you go, provide some feedback for us. We are definitely looking to hear more from you so that we can make this an experience where we all can learn a little bit more, but also build our own capacities to support 21st century programming. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And thank you to everyone who was able to share in the chat box their experiences with the last session and takeaways from this session. Thank you so much for sharing your best practices, especially for those who are returning to apply again. Great. We have a lot of expertise in the room. So thank you so much for participating. And we hope to see you next time.